The attack on students has many authors, and I'm going to lay out three of the authors of that attack. One of the authors is the intensification or the commercialization, or what we sometimes call the privatization of Indian higher education. That's one of the authors of this particular incident or series of incidents. Second author is a direct attack on the Indian left, broadly put, left currents, left thought, whatever. Third is a much older attack, and that is the attack on Dalits in education specifically. These are the three authors. They have conjoined into this moment, and they've erupted in these various institutions with a great deal of public concentration. So let's take them one by one. The first, the commercialization of education. Now, let me suggest something to you. The attacks by the government have been largely at central government and provincial government public institutions, state higher education institutions, where there is not being a right-wing culture. Or to put it the other way around, in central or state government institutions, higher education institutions, where there has been generally a left presence, considerable left presence. For instance, there was no attack on Delhi University or its student body, because Delhi University's student body is dominated by the BJP Union. They didn't go after that student section. They went after JNU. They went after Central Hyderabad University. They went after Jadavpur because they are active there. So this is an interesting political attack. It's what one might think of as a very concerted political attack. They haven't gone after students at private institutions, at the Shiv Nadars, at the this, at the that. Well, they don't need to, because at these institutions, student unions and student politics are not allowed. There is no politics really at these new private higher education institutions. The right wing loves these institutions. They don't like the politicized campus, where the politicized campus is against them. When the politicized campus is for them, they are fine. Remember, when ABVP kids circled Central Hyderabad University chanting slogans to go in and smash people to keep the siege up, nobody arrested them. It's a political attack. This is not merely an attack on students. It's a political attack on students who are broadly on the left side of the ledger. It's not against all students. It's particular. In Allahabad University, Richa Singh is getting it. She's the independent student body president of Allahabad University. But the right-wing kids who went and gherawed Siddharth Vardarajan when he came to give a lecture on campus, nothing happens to them. This is a directly political attack. In the last budget of the BJP government, they cut higher education budget by about almost 20%. And they want to promote something they call centers of excellence. What is a center of excellence? It's basically a place where you train people in tech to become technocrats. You don't want them to learn critical thinking. You want them to learn, engineering, computer science, maybe law. But law in that way where there is no teeth in the mouth of a lawyer. There is no guts in the heart of a lawyer. In the 2009 Universities Bill, the Act of 2009, they pushed this idea of having a common syllabus. And one of the interesting things about India's higher education acts is that each university has its own act, because each university has its ecology. JNU has a certain mandate, Central Hyderabad has a certain mandate, Film and Television Institute certain mandate. They all have different mandates. It's a complex and diverse ecology. It's how education should be. By the way, I don't think Indian education is perfect. There's a lot of room to grow. There are insufficient resources. There need to be more universities. There needs to be more, wider range of things taught. But this is not their critique. Their critique is, we want to have institutions where students come and they are career driven. Why common syllabus? Well, imagine if somebody like Dinanath Batra, I don't know if you followed his Shiksha Bachao Andolan, Save Education movement. I mean, it's the opposite, it's Destroy Education movement. Dinanath Batra, can you imagine if Dinanath ji is now in charge of the common syllabus? I mean, it's the RSS dream. As soon as this government came to power, they knocked off all these judicious heads of various central government institutions. Film and technology. Who did they bring? A guy who, I don't know what his qualifications are. Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, they got rid of, I think, one of the most intelligent directors after Ravindra Kumar was Mahesh Rangarajan. Very interesting man. I may not agree with him politically, but boy, he's a sober-minded, serious historian. They got rid of him. They're getting rid of people who are running these central government institutions systematically. The World Bank General Agreement on Trade and Services, what is called GATS. The General Agreement on Trade and Services encourages countries like India to open educational institutions to international educational services, meaning educational traders will come in and commercialize Indian education. Why not allow Indian education to compete in the free market of education? That's what the World Bank is promoting. So in a sense, it's not only some ancient Indian fascism showing its face. This is precisely the BJP government going along the grain of the World Bank. And this, by the way, is a global dynamic, as you can imagine from the WTO interest. This is happening everywhere. There are protests in South Africa around fee hike. This is related to the issue of eviscerating, destroying decent quality, democratic public education institutions. You may have seen about, 2-3 years ago in England, huge fight by the students to protect cheaper access to educational institutions, to prevent privatization of education, etc. Point number 2, the attack on the left. As I said, they didn't go after Delhi University. They went after JNU. This is just in Delhi. They've been, again, trying over the course of not just this BJP period, but from the 1990s, trying to go after all the main reservoirs of the left. Whether it's trade unions, I mentioned they're cutting trade union protection, socioeconomic gains that workers have won over the years, but all kinds of pockets of left-wing activity are being challenged. And students have been a main auxiliary force of all kinds of left-wing movements. If you look at JNU, which is really the best example of this, JNU until now, from the 1970s till today, is a college where the right and the Congress make no impact. I mean, the most brutal debates are all on the left. Whether it's between one faction of the Maoists or CPIM or CPI, they are battling each other. It's totally dominated by the left. JNU has been a target of Hindutva from the 1980s. They have called it an anti-national abode. There was Guru Murthy's editorial in 88, 89, somewhere there. He says, abode of anti-nationals. RSS has long wanted to break the neck, essentially, of JNU, seeing it too closely in the camp of the left and producing over generations left-wing people who have given it trouble. After all, let's be frank, JNU is a great place of abuse against RSS. I mean, you just walk onto campus and there's a million posters making, light of their great traditions, their own peculiar brand of traditions. Now, the attack on JNU is only one piece of this attack on the left, as I said. There's been a much broader attack, that's ongoing, whether it's, the expulsion of, lawyers and human rights people from Chhattisgarh, whether it's the arrest in Bombay of, again, critical faculty. Some of this is not driven by the BJP but by the Trinamool in Bengal, whether Professor Mohapatra forwards a cartoon making fun of Mamata Banerjee, gets arrested, on the Telecommunications Act, the violation on the Telecommunications Act, the use of sedition or the language of sedition, not only against students but against a wide range of people. Number 3. Of course, there is much older than colonialism, much older than the Indian Republic. There is an old, malicious, deeply toxic anti-Dalit strand, particularly in the arena of education. And this was refracted deeply when the BJP started coming to power in the early 1980s. Now, we remember that when Lal Krishna Advani, we may remember that as the time of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, the Mandir campaign. But I don't know how many people remember, but the slogan was Mandir or Mandal. It was never only Mandir. In 1984 election, BJP wins only 2 seats. Eventually they are going to have a bonanza in less than a decade. But 2-3 years before 1990, they start going hard against the issue of reservations. When VP Singh is in power, he revives from the vault the Mandal Commission report, certifies it. I don't know if you remember, but it was just a one-sentence certification. Certified the Mandal report, we accepted, we're going to abide by it, and then the Mandal agitation begins. So the words become Mandir or Mandal. Those were always together. The attack on higher education for Dalits has an old history, but it gets condensed into this moment of liberalization. This is the new BJP Trimurti. It's not just Mandal and Mandir, it's Mandal, Mandir and Mall. You know, these are the three great gods of the BJP era. You know, this middle caste, dominant caste desire to have the goods of liberalization, for which the avenue is the university, and the frustration and anger at the so-called quotas, etc., has had a deep resonance inside BJP politics and its so-called vote bank. Mr. Chancellor Apparao was the chief warden in the university in 2001, when in an incident that I wish people talked about more, he rusticated or expelled 11 Dalit students. And there's a long history in this university of expulsion of Dalit students. This didn't happen with Rohit and this recent, this has been going on since the 1990s. In fact, I don't know how many of you, I really recommend reading Professor Thorat's report on universities published in 2007. Is about the humiliations and discrimination against Dalit students in higher education in India. It's a very important report. He was then, I think, the chairperson of the SC/ST Commission. This attack in Hyderabad, the attack in particular on Dalit students, again, might have a very old resonance, but it has a new one as well. It's linked deeply to the politics of class as well, where this section of middle caste, dominant caste say, we want those social goods, and the road is blocked by reservation. If we can get Dalit students out, other backward castes out, the road for our advancement is open wider. Finally, it is true that when you see protests like this, or you talk to students, there's a long history of student protest in India. Going back, let's say, to the emergency, and in fact to the freedom movement. When students actively participated against the British. There's a very long history of student protest. Until recently, even during the emergency, students shared a broad ideological framework with the state. In other words, they broadly shared concepts of secularism, democracy, secular nationalism, democratic nationalism. There was a broad agreement between the state and the public. The time now is different. There is no shared framework between the current state apparatus and its ruling parties and the students. They are proponents of Hindutva nationalism, which is very different from secular democratic nationalism. And they are using any instrument. That's why the term anti-national is so important for them. They are using any instrument to go after the students. The instrument of Kashmir would have been a blunt instrument, because at the same time as they were going after the students at JNU for being anti-national on Kashmir, they were busy making an electoral deal with the PDP party, with Mehbooba Mufti and others, whose position on Afzal Guru's execution was much further than the students. There are sections of the PDP that believe Afzal Guru is a martyr. So while they were making an electoral and therefore government deal with the PDP, they were attacking the students on Kashmir. So now the times are very different, because they are fighting on two different terrains of nationalism. It's no longer a shared discourse at all. This is like two different worlds colliding. That is why it's such a perilous situation today. Whatever we do, we have to remember that students are seditious because they use their brains. That's true. But other people are also seditious, and other people are also getting it. And we need to have a much more open understanding of the nature of this attack. And our fight back has to be as capacious, as broad-minded as our understanding of what's happening. This is the time of great unity. The big gap is between the Dalit movement and the left movement. Liberation of India has to go through left unity and left Dalit unity. Without that, there is no future for India. India will fall into the abyss of Hindutva nationalism, and then God help us all. Thanks a lot.